Today, for the weekly update, I'm talking about everything but books, even though this is a booktube channel. So, what will we be talking about later? What I'm currently reading because I didn't finish any books, what I watched, so a bunch of foreign cinema, and I think I'll talk a little bit about Clair Obscur Expedition 33 because I haven't talked about it yet. So, hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Zach. This channel is usually, yes, a booktube channel because I'm usually reading and talking about science fiction and fantasy books. But yes, I do have a bunch of other interests such as comics, manga, and foreign films, movies in general, and a little bit of everything of visual mediums and storytelling. And with that said, usually I talk about what did I read this week, but I actually didn't finish any book this week, which is rare for me. But if you're in the Northeast region or anywhere in the northern latitudes, you know it is freezing. New York is still below freezing all week. So I have not been getting out. So I have not been doing my extra normal outside activities to listen to audiobooks. I think my reading or listening is way down this month, or at least these past 2 weeks when we've been snowed in and frozen in up here in New York. So with that said, I did read a little bit and didn't finish any books, but I'm making progress. And what I'm currently reading and to talk about is Malazan, Book of the Fallen, Book 4, House of Chains by Steven Erikson. So this book is, yes, as the title says, the fourth book in the Malazan series. It started a bit slow, which is not good for my reading and my willingness to push through because once again, in the Malazan series, this book picks up where not the previous books left off, but the book before that. So very interesting for me that as far as Malazan as a whole is constructed, book 1 and then book 3 connect. Book 2 is a different story and a side story. And now that I'm here in book 4 connects back to book 2. But of course, it does reference everything that happened on the other books. So it does all one continuous story in one continent with all different characters, but it's following the storylines of the second book, Deadhouse Gates, where we saw the Chain of Dogs, which is this one big military event that had a lot of apparent consequences that at the time didn't maybe seem as important, but now I'm sort of maybe understanding what people say when they say Malazan's so great. It's got such a great story because book 3 didn't pay off this book 2's ending, but now here in book 4, we're jumping back to book 2, and it is connecting to what's happening with the whirlwind and all the characters that we saw in book 2. So maybe I'm getting a little more appreciative of Deadhouse Gates in retrospect, because at the time, book 2 was not my favorite. I loved book 1, Gardens of the Moon. And then having finished Memories of Ice, I love book 3, Memories of Ice, because it had so much cool stuff going on that I loved in Gardens of the Moon. You had the Bridge Burners, you had Whiskey Jack, Anamanda Rake, you had all the Talani Mass. But here we are in book 4, and it starts off on a totally different storyline, unrelated to any of the 3 previous books. So we start learning about a new character who is connected to the lore of the world's great world building, but it did take like 3 or 4 hours of audiobook time to finally get out of this intro prologue storyline that we were in and then start to see this character's journey. He's heading to the desert. He's going to 7 cities and it's connecting to the Chain of Dog events in the desert and the whirlwind and everything happening there. And okay, now it's starting to come together and now we're getting the gods involved. Cotillions here, Dancer. Yeah, we're learning about the Malazan Empire and Ascension, and I'm slowly building up. So I'm about 50% in with House of Chains, and we're finally getting connected to what that House of Chains title is, the stuff that I love, learning more about the Deck of Dragons. So if you're a Malazan fan, it is a slow start. It's a slow burn, but it's slowly ramping up now at about the 50% point. I'm just started book 3, so like chapter 11, 10, 11, something like that. Starting the 3rd book of this. So like we're in the second half of the story and it's picking up. Wouldn't say it's great yet because I haven't seen the payoff for all the setup that's happening so far, but I am getting more invested. So that's why nothing read, but what I'm currently reading, Malazan Book 4. And to just talk on a little bit of a tangent that even though, yes, I'm reading one fantasy book at the moment, I read a manga, or actually manhwa, Korean manhwa, that I'm actually really enjoying that came highly recommended on Reddit, where I usually get my recommendations. That is The Breaker. So I'm really enjoying The Breaker. I think it's pretty interesting. Martial arts school drama, and it reminds me of the movie I'm going to talk about in a second, which is GTO. So the setting is a school, and the teacher is sort of a GTO style teacher from the GTO manga or the GTO anime or the GTO live action movies. And he's this teacher who's sort of not really a teacher. He has a bit of a rebellious side, but what we learn is that the teacher, so far, I'm only 2 volumes into it. I'm on volume 3, but the teacher is actually the 9 arts dragon, and the teacher's secretly a martial arts badass, and he's helping this student that's bullied sort of grow into himself, I guess, and learn martial arts, even though he's like reluctant to teach him, because apparently the 9 arts dragon is the one that he's like the avatar. He can know all 9 arts of all the best martial arts styles. So it's pretty interesting, if a bit sort of cliche for school-based fighting manga stories or martial arts stories. It reminds me a bit of Holy Land, which is another manga I read a couple of years ago, also about like a high schooler who, in the case of Holy Land, he sort of just picks up martial arts on his own. It's more of a personal journey of overcoming street fighting. Whereas here in the Breaker so far, it's a lot of street fighting, but it's almost to like shonen levels where they're doing like special moves. A bit of a different take, and has, yes, that GTO flavor where it's serious, and then the main character, like GTO, will just exaggerate and sort of that chibi deformed style that we see in a lot of anime and manga. So it's funny, it's lighthearted, it is a great kind of breather read. But I'm also reading, yes, The Breaker. And now talk about what we watched. We watched 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 movies this weekend. So pretty decent movie weekend. We started off with a bit of a bummer, but it was all right. It was like just a general popcorn flick, and that is 2025's Anaconda with Jack Black and Paul Rudd. So top billing on the cast. Okay, we're going to give it a try despite the low scores. And the premise sounded funny. It is pretty funny, but at the same time, it's just Jack Black being Jack Black. You sort of know what you're getting into. That said, it's about a crew of friends that are filmmakers with a passion. The fact that Jack Black's character makes wedding films stings to my heart as a former wedding photographer and wedding videographer. So Jack Black's character is a secret film lover, and they made films as a kid. And so they get the crew back together in midlife and decide to remake the Sony Pictures classic Anaconda with J-Lo and Ice Cube and John Voight. So they grit some money, and then they head out to Brazil, the Amazon, and they attempt to like low budget shoot Anaconda, their own version, the reboot of Anaconda, and hijinks ensue. It's funny, it's irreverent, but it is what it is. It's just a good time. It wasn't like peak filmmaking by any means, but it was just a turn off your brain, laugh at Jack Black, laugh at Paul Rudd's character. You sort of know where it's going. Has some great cameos, some funny moments, but it wasn't like laugh out loud funny the whole time. So a bit of a hit or miss for me. But then, yes, after that, I watched GTO Revival from 2024. And this is, yes, where the GTO comes in. This is the most recent remake of GTO. It's the same actor, Takashi Surimachi, who played the original GTO character in the live action adaptations of the movie. So GTO Revival returns Surimachi into his role as Onizuka. So Akiro Onizuka is a teacher at a high school, and in this remake or revival, he's back assigned on another mission at another school to turn around the school. So it's just a sort of throwback to the story of GTO, where this teacher who's like a biker and unorthodox teacher has to go into a school and solve all their problems with his unorthodox methods and fight against the system. And in this case, GTO Revival, he's fighting against online bullying. So it is an updated version of GTO where he deals with online cyberbullying in Japanese high school. So it's a remake on the classic, still just themes that high school students deal with. So it was all right, nothing special. And then another sort of nothing special, but I just watched it as sort of a guilty pleasure. And that is 1995's The $60 Million Man with Stephen Chow. So this is just a classic throwback Hong Kong film that apparently I had never watched. I've watched a lot of Stephen Chow comedies. He's one of those top billed names that when I was getting into Hong Kong cinema, that yes, Stephen Chow is a no name. And actually I'd never seen this one. So I saw it and yeah, I'm going to give it a shot. And There's probably a reason why I didn't watch it earlier. It is pretty terrible, but that said, it's just that slapstick Stephen Chow humor. It's just a classic story of that formula that Stephen Chow has made. That's why it probably got no notoriety as some of his more known work. Of course, the big ones being Kung Fu Hustle and Shaolin Soccer, God of Cookery, my favorites, the big name ones. But he's been made so many other ones like Fight Back to School, Royal Tramp, all those these other classic era of late 90s early 2000s Hong Kong Stephen Chow comedies, but this is just a forgettable one where in this case Stephen Chow is a playboy millionaire in Hawaii. So kind of interesting because it's Hawaii in the 90s and he's there, and over like halfway through the movie, after whatever happens in the first half of just him being a playboy at this school, is that he gets blown up and rebuilt as a $60 million man. And somehow he has, yes, bad 90s CGI, can turn his body into various objects, and it's just weird. And he goes on like a battle, and he gets the girl, because of course there's a romance subplot, but it made no sense. I mean, there was a plot, but it was really nothing memorable. But yeah, $60 million man from Stephen Chow in 1995. And then to switch things back to a bit more highbrow, what I watched was 2025's Renoir, which is a movie out of Japan. And it was on the radar because it was nominated at the Cannes Film Festival, Cannes. I'm pronouncing it right. Probably not, but it was nominated for the Palme d'Or, one of the top billing at the Cannes Film Festival. And yeah, it was an interesting coming of age story with a main character, main actor, actress who's a high school girl. I think she's high school and middle school. She's very young, and it's because she's fifth grade in the film. But it's an interesting look. It's set in the 80s in Japan, so it's a different time, pre cell phones. It's this character Fuki, and she is just growing up and dealing with life, I guess, is the main plot of the story. Her father is stricken with cancer in the hospital. Her mother is overworked, trying to deal with Fuki and her husband, who's an older gentleman, and age-wise even to the mother. And she's dealing with her husband slash Fuki's father getting scammed out of money and his new role, and overwhelmed with work, and she has work problems, and we see just snippets of her life, and this is all reflected through the eyes of our protagonist, Fuki, just dealing with life as a fifth grader and navigating the world, navigating relationships with her classmates. She meets some friends, so it's there's like a plot or like a storyline, but it's not like a set goal or anything. It's just more of just a coming of age tale and story, but very cool cinematography. I thought it was shot great. It looks great. It sounds great. There's some maybe unintentionally funny scenes where Fuki imitates animals. She goes on phone dating. Some scary scenes. That wasn't the funny part, but it was just an interesting story. I enjoyed it. I thought it was, that sort of highbrow, Cannes Film Festival sort of material. So I think it will appeal to those more serious film watchers. That kind of contradicts everything I watched earlier, like the Stephen Chow movies or Anaconda. And then lastly, to, yes, bring it back to lowbrow, we watched Love is Hard from 2025 out of China. Kind of sort of a made for TV movie style feel. It's just a very standard comedy, romance comedy, but I don't know if I really call it romance comedy, but a plot you've seen before. It is a husband wife who are having marriage problems, as you can probably tell by the title, Love is Hard. And the wife gets the idea that she's going to make her husband jealous to win him back and spice up their love life. And then hijinks ensue. And of course, the husband misinterprets it and goes off the other way. The wife misinterprets it, and it's always just miscommunications, and they're not talking to each other, and they're have these crazy schemes, and it's funny, standard, but the plot was, of course, nothing you haven't seen before and nothing really to write home about, but it was an okay time to kind of watch in the background. It's sort of one of those second screen movies, but for watching Chinese, of course, I'm paying attention 100%. My wife was not really paying attention to it because it is sort of a forgettable plot. It has Xiaoyang as the main actor from the Detective Chinatown series. So you may know the name, but that was Love is Hard, and that's what we watched. That's what I'm reading. And then lastly, what to talk about, because this is not about books, because I'm only reading one book, is maybe talk about video games. So something I haven't touched on this channel, so I'm going to briefly talk about it now as a reminder to myself to maybe record a full video on this, is talk about what I finished as a video game 2 weeks ago, actually, is Clair Obscur Expedition 33. It's by Sandfall Interactive. This game was, yeah, it just blew me away. I started it over the break, over the winter break, because I was off work, had extra time. And I was like, you know what? I'm actually going to finally give this a shot. I had heard about it so much. Towards the end of the year, it was up for all these Game of the Year awards. It was talked about on Reddits, on the subreddits that I frequent, like the fantasy subreddits. People are even talking about this video game. I just sort of had to see what the hype was about, and it just sucked me in, blew me away, and I really, really enjoyed it. It is the first game I've played in probably 3 or 4 years. The last game I played was Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade on PS5, which is, it came out, yeah, like during COVID when we got that. So like 2021, I think, is when I started that. And the last game I played since that was, yeah, 3 years later, Clair Obscur. Just something about the game. So I really enjoyed this, that the game was very linear and very easy to get into. It sort of held your hand for better or for worse. For myself, as an older gamer with not as much time to play games, it was great to just jump in for 30 minutes, or usually end up being like an hour, hour and a half, to experience part of the story, explore a bit. You didn't need to grind or go on a million side quests. I just stuck to the main storyline, and you finish it in about 40 hours is all I took. I didn't do any of the side quests. I didn't grind hard. I kept it on low difficulty to just experience the story. And the combat was very engaging. It has this quick time sort of reaction based combat system where you're dodging, so you're actually engaged in the combat a little more than turn based, but it was still turn based enough for my taste. I'm not really a fan of Souls like games where you're like Twitch playing, where you've got to have great reflexes and button, to walk around, like a Zelda style where it's open world and your action, like an action RPG. I like that this was more turn based, that you encountered enemies, you entered the battle screen, you fought. There was interactive elements, the dodging and parrying system during the battles, but it was very structured battles, which again harkens back to my childhood growing up on games like the JRPGs like Final Fantasy series. So I really enjoyed the system, how it was more of a throwback to that older time. I think that also nostalgia feeling of Expedition 33 was the fact also that the characters are much older. So as part of the plot, the characters are aged up. They're in their 30s, or I think late 20s, because the whole plot involves around the world sort of sacrificing people of a certain age as they count backwards from 100, and now we're at 33. So anyone 33 or older gets sucked away by the, on this, not to be too, I guess, spoiler on the plot, but be sucked away to this other world. So they send out these expeditions to kind of fight back against the paintress and stop this like culling that is happening. So it's a very interesting plot with very more mature themes. It's not like a Final Fantasy where it's just save the world and it's always teenagers saving the world, or at least maybe some of the other ones like Cloud is young, Tifa, and they're all kind of young in Final Fantasy VII. In Final Fantasy X, Tidus is not like super old either. So maybe I haven't played some of the other ones, the newer ones, where they're older, but Final Fantasy does tend to skew kind of like teenage heroes. So it was refreshing having these adult themes where it's adult characters dealing with adult situations. Not to spoil it, but yes, the plot, it does revolve around sort of tragedy and loss and dealing with grief. So it's very adult themes, but set in this gorgeous French-inspired fantasy world that looks great. It sounds great. It was a great time just looking around, painting the camera around, seeing the world. So as a fan of fantasy, I think it's highly recommended. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was just a great time. And the fact that it's a condensed story, not one of these 100-hour, yeah, I could finish this in 40 hours, and I would only be maybe halfway through another AAA game like Elden Ring, which I hear also about all the time on fantasy subreddits, because I think it was co-written by George R. R. Martin of A Song of Ice and Fire / Game of Thrones fame. So I do kind of want to give Elden Ring a shot, but again, Elden Ring is that action RPG, more Twitch gaming, open world, try a lot. So not sure I'm ready for a Souls-like game yet. So I'm going to end this video by just pleading, if you can recommend something besides Final Fantasy that sort of hits those feelings of Clair Obscur Expedition 33, I would love to get back into just casual gaming, an hour here, hour there, as a way to just experience a world like I experienced a book. So I love, of course, the world building. And I think Clair Obscur Expedition 33 really hit on that world building. It was a great world building with a great story, everything you're looking for in a great book or a great movie. So it definitely hit all those high notes for me. And I can't recommend it enough. I think everyone should, if you're a fan of fantasy and world building, check out Clair Obscur Expedition 33. So that is the end of this recording, end of this weekly yap session where I'm just talking about things that are top of mind to me. So hope you're enjoying your reading, you're staying warm, you're thawing out. We are slowly thawing out here this first week of February, and looking ahead to February, I am going to keep plowing through the second half of Malazan, and I think after that I will take a side tour on another book that maybe came to the library, like The Black Tongue Thief, and then it's back to Sun Eater or another book I have in Audible. So a couple epic fantasy to work through this February, but I'm keeping my slate open, looking for new games, looking for new mangas to read, and yeah, it's continuing epic fantasy. So thanks for watching this session, what I'm into, what I'm reading right now. What are you into? Have a great week. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Talk to you later. Bye.